The sun was cruel that morning. It burned through the clouds and lit every face that came to watch me fall. I remember the sound first. Boots scraping against the dust, the shuffle of coins, the cough of a man too pleased with himself. Red Creek had gathered like it always did for spectacle. Only this time I was the show. They said my husband died owing more than he owned. The banker made sure everyone knew it. Our land was gone, our livestock scattered. Even the house my boys were born in belonged to someone else now. What remained was us, one widow and 3 sons, 12, 9, and 6. The youngest still carried his father's wooden bird, a little carving he used to hold when thunder scared him. They made us stand on the auction block where they used to sell horses. The boards creaked beneath my boots. The air smelled of sweat, dust, and judgment. Debt is debt, the banker said, voice oily and loud. A family's only as good as what it can pay. The auctioneer called for bids on what little was left, our pots, my shawl, even my wedding ring. The same ring my husband had slipped on my finger beside a church that doesn't stand anymore. No one bid. No one spoke. They just watched. I could feel my boys trembling against me. The oldest tried to stand tall, jaw set like his father's, but his lip quivered. I wanted to tell him it would be all right, but lies have a taste, and my mouth was already full of dust. Then I heard laughter, thin and cruel. Someone in the crowd spat near my boots. "Ain't worth the trouble," another man said. 3 mouths and a cursed widow. Something in me went hollow. I stopped hearing words, only the wind pushing through the square. That's when the voice came. Deep, calm, steady as Riverstone. "I'll take it," he said. Everything stopped. The crowd turned. Even the wind seemed to listen. A man sat his horse at the edge of the square, broad shoulders, sunburnt skin, coat the color of dust. A rifle hung across his saddle. His eyes, when they met mine, were the kind that had seen too much and judged little. The banker squinted. "You'll take what, stranger?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out a single silver coin. Tossed it toward the stand. It hit the wood with a hard ring. "The ring," he said. Then after a pause, "And them." The crowd erupted in laughter. One woman gasped like she'd seen a ghost. I couldn't breathe. The word "them" hung in the air like a mistake too large to fix. The banker sneered. "You buying a family now?" The cowboy didn't answer. He dismounted slow, spurs clicking against the dust, and climbed the steps. I could smell the trail on him, smoke, leather, rain. He bent to pick up the coin and pressed it into the banker's palm. "She's not property," he said quietly. "You just forgot that." The banker froze, his jaw tightening. "You got no claim here." "Don't need one." The man turned to me then, his eyes softening, though his voice stayed rough. "Ma'am," he said, "you and your boys, you don't belong to them anymore." I didn't move. Couldn't. My heart hammered like it was trying to find a way out. Around us, the crowd muttered. A few called him mad. Someone threw a clump of dirt that hit the post near my head. He stepped closer. "You're safe now," he said. "You're home." I looked down at my sons. The youngest clutched his bird so tight his fingers went white. The oldest stared at the man like he was trying to decide whether to believe him. When I finally spoke, my voice barely carried. "Why would you do this?" He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw the truth. Not pity, not rescue. Just a man who'd already lost too much to watch someone else lose everything. "Because somebody should have," he said. Then he turned and held out his hand. The crowd parted as he led us off that block. Out of the square, out of Red Creek, behind us. The whispers followed like dust in the wind. But ahead was silence. And the long road west, I didn't know his name yet. Didn't know where he was taking us. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel owned. And when my boy's wooden bird caught the sunlight, its wing glinting gold for just a moment, I almost believed it could fly. The sun was sinking when we left Red Creek behind. The sky burned red, the kind of red that feels like it's warning you. I rode behind the cowboy whose name I barely knew. My boys huddled close on the second horse he'd brought. The sound of the town faded, swallowed by the wind and the creak of leather straps. The youngest wept quietly. His little hands held tight to the wooden bird his father carved before the fever took him. I wanted to tell him we were free, that it was over, but I didn't even know what freedom meant anymore. My heart felt hollow, scraped clean by shame and dust. Caleb, I'd heard someone whisper his name, didn't speak much. He rode ahead, back straight, hat pulled low against the dying light. Every so often he'd glance over his shoulder, checking that we still followed. His silhouette cut sharp against the sun, like a shadow carved out of fire. We crossed a ridge where the wind carried the scent of smoke. Below lay the ruins of ranches, burned fences, blackened trees, and the ghosts of men who'd fought over water and soil. The land wars had taken everything from folks like us. I wondered if he'd fought in them too. My throat ached from dust and questions. I finally found the courage to ask, "Why help us?" He didn't turn. "Because no one else would," he said. His voice carried something heavy in it. Not pride, not pity. Just truth. We rode on in silence. The world stretched wide and cruel, but for the first time, I wasn't standing alone against it. When the night settled, stars poured over the plains. Caleb lit a small fire by a creek bend. My boys ate bread and dried meat he'd packed, their faces glowing in the firelight. He sat apart, sharpening his knife, eyes fixed on the flame like it was telling him secrets. "You can rest now," he said finally. I wanted to believe him. But rest felt dangerous, like letting your guard down when the wolves are still out there. I lay beside my boys, listening to the fire crackle and the low murmur of a man who carried storms in his silence. By dawn, the wind shifted, cooler, cleaner. He told us we were close. We followed a narrow trail through canyon rock, the walls towering high and gold in the morning light. Then suddenly the path opened. My breath caught. A valley spread before us, green and alive. Grass shimmered like water under the breeze. A river wound through the center, silver as a mirror. Pines lined the cliffs, their tops burning gold in the sun. It was impossible. A secret piece of heaven hidden behind stone and ruin. My boys gasped. The youngest pointed. "Mama, look, it's real water." Caleb reined in his horse and looked back at me. "This is home," he said. "Yours?" I asked. "Ours now." "If you want it," I didn't answer. The words home and want had lost their shape months ago. But something in his tone, quiet, unbending, made me believe he meant it. He led us to a small cabin near the riverbank. Smoke curled from its chimney and the fence around it was strong, freshly mended. Chickens clucked behind a shed. It looked lived in, but not loved. Like a man had built it to survive, not to stay. He swung off his horse and held out his hand to help me down. I hesitated before taking it. His grip was steady, rough from work. "You'll be safe here," he said simply. I studied his face. The faint scar along his jaw, the eyes that didn't quite meet mine. Safe sounded like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. My boys were already inside, touching everything, laughing for the first time in weeks. Their laughter filled the cabin, bouncing off the wood like sunlight through dust. I stood in the doorway, half in the light, half in shadow. Lightning flashed far off across the plains, splitting the horizon in two. Caleb turned toward it, silent, like he knew the storm personally. His hand brushed the brim of his hat. That's when I realized the storm wasn't coming. It was already here, and it wore the shape of the man who'd saved us. The valley grew quieter after that first storm. The kind of quiet that wasn't peace, just waiting. Days slipped by like wind through wheat. I mended what I could. Torn curtains, broken chairs, the cracks that time had left in the walls. The boys turned wild in the best way, chasing each other through the meadow, their laughter echoing off the cliffs. It sounded strange at first, like a sound we'd forgotten belonged to us. Caleb stayed to himself. Every morning before the first light hit the ridge, I'd hear the creak of the front door and the soft jingle of spurs. By the time the coffee boiled, he'd already be a shadow at the fence line, hammer in hand, fixing what no one else would notice was broken. By dusk, he'd return, shoulders covered in dust, eyes distant. He'd nod to me, sometimes manage a half smile, then disappear into the barn or out by the river where the moon painted silver. over his silence. It was a strange kind of safety, being guarded by a man who spoke less than the wind. The cabin began to breathe again under my hands. I swept the floors, found old nails, patched the roof where rain crept in. But the deeper I cleaned, the more the ghosts showed themselves. I found a woman's shawl folded neatly in a drawer, smelling faintly of lavender long gone. A locket tucked behind a loose board in the wall, small, delicate, engraved with initials I didn't recognize. Inside, a curl of hair the color of wheat, and on the far wall near the hearth, a child's drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands beside a horse. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but someone had pinned it there carefully, as if afraid to forget. I stared at it for a long time. That night, when the boys had fallen asleep, I sat by the window. The wind moved through the grass outside like whispering voices. From the other room came a sound, low, rough, broken. Caleb. I rose quietly, heart pounding. Through the open crack of the door, I saw him. He sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, body shaking in a rhythm that wasn't crying but close enough to it. The moonlight caught the edge of a scar down his shoulder. Then I heard him speak. Just one word. Anna. The name cut through the dark like a blade. I stepped back before he could see me, my hand pressed to my chest. I didn't know who Anna was, wife, daughter, ghost, but I knew the sound of someone haunted. I'd made that sound myself once when the fever took my husband. The next morning he was already at the stove when I came in. The smell of coffee filled the room. He poured a cup and slid it toward me like it was an apology. Didn't mean to wake you, he said. I met his eyes. You didn't. He nodded once, then went back to mending a saddle strap. It should have ended there, but something about the quiet between us felt fragile. I broke it. This place, I started. You built it yourself? He looked up. Mostly. Must have had help. His jaw tightened. Once. The word carried more weight than it should. He didn't look at me again, but his hand stilled on the leather, and I knew I'd brushed against something he wasn't ready to face. After that, we began sharing small moments. Simple ones. He'd hand me tools when I fixed the window. I'd bring him water when he worked the fields. Some evenings we'd sit on the porch and watch the boys skip stones across the creek. He never said much, but sometimes that silence felt almost kind, almost human again. Still, every time I passed that drawing on the wall or caught sight of the locket's gleam, I felt it, the weight of the ghosts that still lived here. And when the wind rose at night, carrying whispers through the cracks, I swore I could hear them. A woman's laugh, a child's giggle, threads of a life that had been ripped clean away. He carried their shadows in every breath. And I began to wonder if saving me had been his way of trying to save himself. The storm came without warning. The sky went black before supper, and by the time I latched the shutters, rain was slashing sideways across the valley. Thunder cracked like gunfire in the hills. My boys huddled close to the hearth, their faces lit in flashes of lightning. Then I heard it, a sound I'll never forget. A cough, wet, deep, wrong. The youngest, Samuel, was burning. I pressed my hand to his forehead, and it was like touching the stove. His eyes rolled, breath short and shallow. "Mama?" he whispered. Then nothing but the rasp of fever. Panic clawed at me. I boiled water, mixed herbs I barely remembered from my mother's kitchen. Anything that might help. The older boys watched, pale and silent. I told them it would be fine, though I could see in their eyes they didn't believe me. Caleb came in from the barn, soaked through, hair plastered to his brow. One look at Samuel and he froze. Then, without a word, he grabbed his coat and rifle. "You can't go out," I said. "The creek's rising. Town's 10 miles. Doctor's there," he said. "I'll be back before morning." Caleb. But he was already at the door. The wind tore it from his hand and slammed it against the wall. He glanced back once, the lightning cutting across his face, and then he was gone. Hours crawled. The rain hammered the roof like it meant to bury us. I sat by Samuel's side, whispering prayers to a God I hadn't spoken to since my husband's funeral. His little hand clutched the wooden bird, the edges worn smooth from years of comfort. I prayed that if nothing else, he could keep holding it. The storm raged on. Once, I thought I heard hooves outside, but it was only thunder rolling down the canyon. By dawn, the fever broke into a frightening stillness. He was too quiet, too pale. My hands shook as I wiped his face. I wanted to scream, but the air felt thick, unwilling to carry sound. Then, a shout. Faint at first, then closer. The door burst open. Caleb staggered in, drenched and bleeding from a gash along his arm. Behind him came the town doctor, mud up to his knees, carrying a satchel. "Move!" the doctor barked, pushing past me. Caleb leaned against the wall, chest heaving. I saw his hands, scraped raw, torn open. "Flash flood took the bridge," he said between breaths. "Had to cross through the gorge." "You could have drowned," I whispered. He didn't answer, just nodded toward Samuel. "He's still breathing?" "Barely." The doctor worked fast, mixing powders, pouring something bitter between my boy's lips. Minutes stretched into an eternity, then Samuel coughed, a weak, beautiful sound. His chest rose, fell, rose again. The doctor sighed and packed up. "He'll make it," he said, "but he's got a guardian angel." He glanced at Caleb, then at me. "Both of you." When they left, the rain had slowed to a whisper. Caleb sat at the table, soaked and trembling. Blood streaked his arm. I found clean cloth, tore a strip, and knelt beside him. "You should have let me bandage that sooner," I said. He smiled faintly. "Didn't want to worry you. You already did." I dabbed the wound with whiskey. He didn't flinch. Under his torn sleeve, the edge of a tattoo showed, a military mark, faded and half burned away. My eyes followed the lines of old scars that mapped his shoulder and ribs, each one a story he hadn't told. "How many storms have you walked through?" I asked. He looked at the fire instead of me. "Too many, but none like this." For a moment, silence filled the room. Soft, warm, alive. "You saved my boy," I said. He shook his head. "You saved me once," he murmured, eyes low. "Now we're even." I wanted to argue, but his voice carried a weight that made arguing feel wrong. Our hands brushed as I tied the bandage. Rough skin against trembling fingers. It wasn't a touch meant for romance, but something deeper. Two people who'd both been broken, finding a place to breathe. The wooden bird sat between us on the table, drying beside the firelight. One wing was chipped now, cracked down the middle. I traced it gently. "He dropped it when the fever hit." Caleb nodded. "It's still holding together." "So are we," I said. He didn't reply, but the ghost of a smile crossed his face before he closed his eyes. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something fragile, something like peace, began to flicker. And for the first time since Red Creek, I wasn't afraid of the quiet. Morning broke soft over the valley. After the storm, the air felt washed clean, every leaf glistening, the river whispering low against its banks. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, carrying the smell of coffee and pine. For once, the house didn't sound afraid. Samuel still slept beside the fire, his little chest rising steady, the fever gone. I brushed a curl from his forehead and thanked the silence. The older boys were outside chasing chickens, their laughter sharp against the crisp air. It sounded almost like music. Caleb sat at the table, turning his hat in his hands. The night had left its mark on him, eyes rimmed red, knuckles bruised, shirt torn at the shoulder. I poured him coffee, the steam curling between us. "You didn't sleep," I said. He shook his head. "Didn't want to." We sat in quiet. The kind that isn't awkward, just heavy with things unsaid. My fingers brushed the edge of my apron where I'd hidden the locket I'd found days before. I'd meant to ask earlier, but the storm had changed everything. Now the sunlight made it gleam faintly through the fabric. I hesitated, then set it on the table between us. "I found this," I said softly. He froze. His jaw tightened. I wasn't prying, I added quickly. It fell behind the dresser. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he reached for it, slow, careful, like a man touching a live flame. His thumb ran over the initials carved into the brass. A.W. And I saw something break across his face. He opened it. Inside were two tiny portraits, a woman and a little girl. both smiling. The child had his eyes, the woman his quiet strength. My wife, he said finally. His voice was barely a whisper. And our daughter. He stared at them as if seeing ghosts he'd tried to forget. Raiders came through in the last war, he said. They took the house, set fire to the barn. I buried them both before I buried the war. The words fell heavy between us. I didn't try to fill the silence. Some things deserve quiet to rest in. His hand trembled as he closed the locket. Wasn't supposed to be me that lived, he said. But the Lord's got a mean sense of humor. I reached across the table, not touching him, just close enough that he'd know I was there. I'm sorry, I whispered. He nodded once, eyes fixed on the flames in the hearth. Don't be. I made peace with ghosts a long time ago. Just haven't figured out how to live with the living again. For a long time, all we heard was the crackle of fire and the wind outside, sweeping through the grass like a memory. Then I spoke. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. When my husband died, they said it was my fault. The debt, the sickness, all of it. The town whispered that I'd cursed him, that I wasn't fit to carry his name. Caleb's head lifted. His eyes, tired, kind, met mine. You believe them? I did, I said. For a while. Until I had to choose between believing them or raising my boys. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You don't owe the world your pain, Martha, he said quietly. You just owe those boys a chance. The way he said my name, steady, sure, undid something inside me. For a moment, the air between us shifted. Not romance, not yet. Something gentler, recognition, like two scarred branches finding each other in the wind. Outside, the breeze caught the wooden bird where it sat on the porch rail. It rocked back and forth, one wing cracked but still moving, stubborn, fragile, alive. I smiled for the first time in months. It felt strange, unfamiliar, like sunlight after too many winters. Caleb saw it, and his own lips twitched in something close to a smile. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. The fire burned low, the coffee cooled, and for the first time since Red Creek, I didn't feel like someone passing through someone else's mercy. I felt like I'd arrived. Spring found the valley before I was ready for it. One morning the frost was gone and the grass rose thick and bright as emeralds. The river ran high with meltwater, singing against the stones. Life crept back into places I thought it had forgotten. The wooden bird sat on the porch rail, sun-bleached and chipped, its broken wing turned toward the sky. My youngest liked to leave crumbs near it, as if feeding something that might wake. I never told him not to. Some hopes deserve to be fed, even if they can't yet fly. Inside the cabin, the smell of wood smoke had softened into the scent of earth and pine. I opened the shutters more now, let the light touch everything we'd reclaimed. The boys had built a swing from an old rope and a plank, and their laughter filled the days. For the first time, I planted a garden. A small one, beans, potatoes, wildflowers that grew along the creek. It was the first green I'd called mine since losing the farm. The soil was dark, rich, alive. Caleb helped me till it. We worked side by side, shovels sinking deep, the rhythm easy as breathing. He didn't speak much, but the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It felt shared. When the sun dipped behind the ridge, we'd sit on the porch with tin cups of coffee. Sometimes he'd tell stories about the old trail drives, about horses that could find their way home better than men could. The boys would fall asleep listening, their heads on my lap. It was peace, a fragile, borrowed kind, but peace all the same. Then the rider came. I saw him long before he reached the cabin, a dark shape cutting across the green, dust rising behind him like smoke. Caleb stood from the porch, hand resting near his revolver, though his face stayed calm. The man pulled up his horse and tipped his hat. His coat bore the mark of Red Creek's bank, slick, black, and heartless. Message for a Mrs. Hale, he said, his voice sharp as paper. Caleb took the letter before I could. You can hand it here, the rider smirked. No trouble, just business. Tell your lady the bank's claiming new rights downstream. Water runs through this valley, don't it? Caleb's eyes hardened. Runs for everyone, the man's smile thinned. Not anymore. He tossed the letter into the dirt, turned his horse, and left without another word. We stood there as his dust settled. The air felt suddenly heavy, like the storm that had once torn through our walls. Caleb picked up the envelope and handed it to me. "You don't need to read it," he said, but I did. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. The words were neat, cruel. The banker, the same man who'd auctioned my ring, my name, my worth, now claimed the valley's water as legally transferred property. If we stayed, we'd be trespassing. I felt the ground sway beneath me. "They want it all," I whispered. "Even this," Caleb's voice dropped low. "He won't stop till he owns the whole valley. And he'll bring men next time." The wind picked up, rattling the porch rail. The wooden bird toppled from its perch, hitting the steps with a hollow crack. I gasped and knelt, cradling it in my hands. One wing had split clean down the grain. "It's not broken," Caleb said quietly, kneeling beside me. His fingers brushed mine, steady and warm. "Just needs mending." The words were simple, but they sank deep. I turned the bird over, thumb tracing the jagged line where the wing had split. "Seems everything I touch breaks," he shook his head. "No. Everything you touch keeps going." Our eyes met then, his full of that storm I'd first seen in him, mine reflecting the sky that couldn't decide if it meant rain or mercy. Behind us, the boys called from the riverbank, their laughter chasing fish and sunlight. I wanted to hold on to that sound, to believe it could drown out the fear building inside me. I stood slowly, clutching the bird. "If they come," I said, "I won't run again." Caleb rose too, the shadow of resolve crossing his face. "Then we'll stand together." The wind carried our words into the valley, over the new garden, across the river that someone now claimed to own. But the water didn't listen. It kept flowing, free as the life it nourished. That night, I set the mended bird on the mantel above the fire. The glue hadn't yet dried, but it stood upright again, one wing crooked, the other whole. It looked stubborn, brave, like the people who'd decided to stay. The morning came too still. No birdsong, no wind in the grass, just a silence thick enough to warn you something was coming. Caleb felt it first. He stood on the porch, hat brim low, scanning the ridge where the trail cut through the hills. Dust rose there, faint at first, then growing, curling into the sky like smoke. 4 riders, armed. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on my apron. The sun caught the gleam of their rifles. My stomach turned to stone. Caleb's jaw tightened as he loaded his own weapon, every motion precise. Practiced, a man who'd done this before and hated that he still could. "They're from Red Creek," he said. I didn't ask how he knew. You could tell by the arrogance in their posture, the kind that comes from men who think the law sits in their pocket. The boys were by the barn. I told them to go inside, to stay quiet no matter what they heard. My oldest hesitated. "Mama's inside," I said. My voice didn't shake. Caleb moved to the porch rail, rifle resting in his hands. He didn't aim yet, just waited. The riders drew close, boots striking dust, spurs glinting under the noon light. When they stopped, the lead man, slick hair, clean coat, too proud for the saddle he sat, tipped his hat toward me. "Afternoon, Mom," he said. "Name's Tull. The bank sent us." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "This valley's under new claim. You folks are trespassing on property belonging to Red Creek Holdings." I stepped forward, standing beside Caleb. "This land doesn't belong to anyone who buys and sells lives." He chuckled, glancing at the others. "You think a widow and a disgraced soldier can keep a valley?" Caleb's voice came low, steady. "We can try." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of the men spat in the dirt and reached for his gun. The shot came fast, too fast to think. Caleb's rifle cracked, the sound echoing through the valley. The man dropped from his horse before the echo died. The others fired back, bullets splintering the porch rail, tearing through the air like angry bees. I ducked behind the post, heart pounding. Caleb didn't. He stepped out into the open. The next shot tore through his shoulder, a bloom of red against his shirt, but he kept firing. One man fell, another's horse reared and threw him. The last rider turned tail, shouting over his shoulder as he fled down the trail. "You'll hang for this, Ward." "You'll hang." Then they were gone. Silence returned, heavy and cruel. The smoke from the guns drifted upward, mingling with the dust. My hands trembled as I ran to him. "Caleb," I whispered. "You're hit." He pressed a hand to his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. "I've had worse," he said, though his face told another story. I helped him inside, every step leaving a trail of crimson drops on the wooden floor. The boys peeked from the doorway, eyes wide with fear. "Stay back," I told them, forcing calm I didn't feel. I tore a strip from my skirt and pressed it against the wound. He hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. "You didn't have to fight for me," I said, my voice breaking before I could stop it. He met my eyes, pale but steady. "Didn't I?" The words cut deeper than the bullet. Outside, the rain started, sudden, hard. I glanced through the open door. The wooden bird lay in the mud where it had fallen, face down, one wing gone, the other shattered. The garden bent under the downpour, the valley bleeding color into the gray. Caleb's breath came ragged, shallow. I held the bandage tighter, whispering anything that might keep him tethered. He half smiled. "You're stronger than you think, Martha." "Don't talk," I said. He chuckled softly. "You sound like her." "Who?" "My wife. When I'd come home from patrol half dead." His voice faded to a whisper. "She used to say the same thing." I pressed my forehead against his good shoulder. "Then listen to her now. Stay." The fire crackled, rain pounding the roof like war drums. I felt his body steady, the worst of the bleeding slowing. When I finally dared to look outside again, the valley seemed smaller, like the world had closed its fists around us. The river ran darker, swollen with mud. The bird was still there, broken, but I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. Some things had to stay where they fell. The dawn came sharp and cold, the kind that slices through sleep and pulls the fear straight out of your bones. Mist crawled low across the valley. From the porch I saw them, dark figures riding through the fog, the sun just touching their rifles, 12 men. Red Creek's sheriff at the front, and beside him the banker, polished boots and a smug smile that didn't belong in the wild. Behind them townsfolk followed, some out of duty, most out of curiosity. You could smell judgment before they spoke it. Caleb was still weak from the wound. He tried to rise when he heard the hooves, but the pain caught him mid-motion. I pressed him back gently. "Stay," I said. He looked at me, the calm in his eyes more terrifying than fear. "They're not here to talk." I stepped outside. The boys crowded behind me, silent. The sheriff dismounted, boots sinking in the wet dirt. "Mrs. Hale," he said, tugging off his gloves, "you're harboring a fugitive. Caleb Ward's wanted for murder. Shot 2 men in Red Creek." "He shot thieves," I said. "They came to steal what wasn't theirs," the banker smirked. "The land wasn't yours to defend. The valley belongs to the bank, same as it did before. Then why come with guns?" I asked. "Because the law doesn't argue with thieves," he said. He nodded toward Caleb. 2 deputies strode forward, yanked open the cabin door, and dragged him out. He stumbled, blood seeping through his bandage. One man looped a rope around his neck and tied it to the porch post, the same kind of knot they'd used in Red Creek for hangings. History repeating, this time in front of my sons. "Don't," I said, stepping forward. "He's no criminal." The sheriff hesitated, but the banker spoke over him. "You of all people should know, Mrs. Hale. Debts always get paid. Your husband couldn't. You can't either." He reached into his coat and pulled something small from his pocket. A gold band dulled with dirt. My breath caught my husband's ring, the one they'd sold at auction, the one Caleb had bought back that first day. The banker tossed it into the mud between us. "A debt's a debt," he said. Caleb straightened, the rope digging into his neck. "You got no law here," he said quietly. "Law's what we carry," one deputy replied. Hand on his revolver. The world shrank to sound, the creak of the rope, the rasp of wind, my sons breathing behind me. And then something broke inside me. Not fear, not rage, just the certainty that I'd already lost everything worth losing once. Never again. My eyes fell on the sheriff's revolver, hanging loose at his belt. I stepped forward, fast and sure, before anyone thought to stop me. My hand closed around it. The weight was cold, real. I fired into the air. The blast shattered the morning stillness, scattering crows from the trees. "Not this time," I said. The crowd froze. Even the wind stopped. The sheriff blinked, his hand halfway to his gun, but not daring to draw. "Mrs. Hale," I leveled the barrel at the rope instead. "You hang one more innocent man, you'll have to hang me too." Caleb met my eyes, quiet pride flickering behind the pain. "Martha," he said softly, "don't." I ignored him. My hands didn't shake. Maybe they should have, but after so much fear, courage just felt like exhaustion with teeth. The banker laughed, sharp, mocking. "You think you can stop this?" I turned the gun toward him. "I already have." No one moved. Then the sheriff sighed, heavy and low, like a man tired of being someone else's weapon. He tipped his hat forward. "Let 'em be," he said. The deputies looked at him uncertain. "Sheriff," he cut them off. "You heard me. There's been enough blood in this valley," the banker sputtered, but when the sheriff turned, no one followed him. The posse drifted back toward their horses, murmuring. Dust rose, swallowing their shapes until they were ghosts again. I walked to Caleb, knife trembling in my hand. The rope was thick, coarse. I sawed through it until it gave way and fell at his feet. He exhaled slow, the red mark still raw around his throat. "You didn't have to—" "I did." I dropped the knife, hands shaking now that it was over. "You fought for me." "I fight back for you." He smiled, faint and tired. "Guess we're even again." The boys came running, clinging to my skirts, crying without sound. The sheriff lingered at the edge of the yard, hat still low. "You'll have trouble again," he warned quietly. "Then we'll meet it standing," I said. He nodded once and rode off, the sound of hooves fading into the wind. When it was just us again, the world went still. I knelt in the mud and picked up the ring. It was cold, heavy with the weight of every promise broken before. Then I saw it, the wooden bird lying beside it. Crushed under a boot print, wings split beyond repair. I lifted both, the ring and the shattered bird, and turned to Caleb. His eyes were glassed with pain, but when I placed them in his hand, he closed his fingers around them, as if they still meant something. "We're done paying," I whispered. He looked at me. Not the woman from the auction block. Not the widow marked by shame, but someone different, someone unbreakable. The wind rose through the valley again, carrying the smell of wet earth and freedom. The rope lay in the dirt behind us, the ring safe in my pocket, the bird's fragments drying in the morning sun. For the first time, the valley felt like it belonged to no one but the living. And that was enough. Weeks passed, and the valley changed its skin. What had been mud and ruin now shimmered with life. The grass grew tall enough to whisper, and wildflowers broke through the earth like small defiant prayers. The river ran clearer than I'd ever seen it, sunlight dancing on its surface. It felt like the land itself had decided to breathe again. Caleb healed slow. The scar on his shoulder still ached when the rain came, but he worked anyway, steady as the seasons. He rebuilt the fence, oiled the hinges, repaired the porch rail where the bullets had splintered the wood. The boys followed him everywhere, mimicking every move, their laughter replacing the echoes of gunfire that once haunted this place. I spent my mornings in the garden. Beans climbed their poles, flowers bloomed in colors I'd forgotten names for, and the soil beneath my nails felt like forgiveness. Each seed I pressed into the ground felt like reclaiming something the world had taken, piece by piece, root by root. One afternoon, Caleb came to me with a small bundle of cedar wood. "Got something to show you," he said. We walked down to the edge of the garden where the old tree bent low over the creek. There he'd built a small birdhouse, simple, sturdy, crafted with the same quiet care he gave everything he touched. The mended wooden bird sat atop it, its wings patched smooth, its colors faint but proud. "Didn't want it gathering dust inside," he said. "Figured it might like the view." I ran my fingers over the tiny carved feathers, feeling the roughness where the crack had been. "You fixed it," he smiled. "You did. I just gave it a place to rest." The wind caught then, brushing through the valley, lifting the scent of lilac and rain. The bird rocked once on its perch, then again, almost as if testing the air. We both watched it move. Neither of us spoke. Some things don't need words. Evenings came gentler now. The sun lingered longer, turning the whole valley gold. The boys chased butterflies through the tall grass, their laughter drifting up to the porch where I sat with a cup of coffee gone cold. Sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for trouble, for the sound of hooves on the ridge. But only the wind answered, soft and harmless. That night, the sky burned orange and purple, and the world seemed too beautiful for words. Caleb found me by the porch rail, the mended birdhouse glowing faintly in the fading light. "You ever think we're meant to find peace?" I asked. He leaned on the post beside me, eyes on the horizon. "Maybe not meant to," he said. "But peace finds those who stop running." I smiled at that. For a long time I'd been running, from debt, from shame, from memory. But here, standing beside him, the ground finally felt steady. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. My breath caught when I saw it, the ring, my husband's ring. Only now it hung from a thin piece of leather, threaded simple and true. He lifted it gently, his hand brushing my throat as he placed it around my neck. "Not as property," he said, "as promise." The metal was cool against my skin, but it warmed fast, like it had waited for this moment. We stood there as the last light faded, the world holding still around us. Then the wind rose again, carrying the smell of rain and cedar. The bird on the roof of its house trembled, once, twice, and lifted. It caught the breeze, wings outstretched, wobbling but determined. The boys shouted in wonder, running after it as it soared a few feet, then landed soft in the grass. Caleb laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from him before, full and free. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not just relief, but gratitude, for storms survived, for things mended, for flight that came even to broken wings. The sun dipped low, painting the valley in gold. Our cabin stood small against the wide world, smoke curling lazy from the chimney. The sound of the river steady and sure. The bird lifted again, higher this time, until it was just a speck against the sky. And for the first time, I believed we might be free.